of Allegiance. I've asked Vice Chair Waters to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. We really appreciate everyone joining us for our last public meeting of the year. And for those joining remotely, thank you for your continued interest and support. As a reminder, today's meeting will be accessible by Zoom, as well as Collier TV and the district's website. Board members, as a general reminder, when speaking, please use the buttons on the dais to be recognized. And also, these microphones require us to get pretty close and right up against the actual microphone itself when we speak so that everyone can hear us. For public comment, for those here in person, if you would like to comment on an agenda item, please complete a speaker card in the lobby and bring it to Miss Erin Connor, who's sitting right here to my right in the front. If you're joining by Zoom, use the raise the hand feature and the staff will call on you. If you're participating via phone, *9 raises your hand and *6 mutes and unmutes your microphone. With that, we're going to go to agenda revisions with Lisa Keeler, and we're celebrating Lisa's birthday this week. So we have lots of cupcakes and special treats today. Happy birthday, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for sharing all of the treats for us. And so everyone in the audience is welcome to help themselves as well. Thank you. Agenda revisions.
Thank you. There are no revisions today.
Okay. Abstentions by board members for items on the agenda. I'll call on each of you to tell me whether or not you have any abstentions or disclosures on the agenda. Vice Chair Waters?
None for me, ma'am.
I have none. Mr. Hill?
I have none.
Ms. Rivera? None for me. Okay, there are no agenda abstentions by the board members. Okay, the next is the approval of the minutes of the August 26, 2021 Big Cypress Basin Board meeting. If there are no corrections or additions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the August 26 meeting minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes from August 26th.
Motion by Vice Chair Waters. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. General public comment. This is the first time of the meeting that we'll hear general public comment. There are two opportunities during the meeting, at the beginning and at the end. So we'll start with anyone who is here in person, followed by those joining us remotely. Erin, are there any public comment requests for this portion?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the room, I have Matt McLean.
Great.
Welcome, Matt McLean. I'm the director of our capital project planning, impact fee, and program management group here at the Growth Management Department. And I'm a new face to your board, but not a new face to Collier County and certainly the Southwest Florida area. I have assumed Amy Patterson's former role within the organization. So in that role, we're obviously work very closely and intimately with the Basin, and we appreciate that opportunity to continue to do so. So I wanted the opportunity just to put my name with a face. I know several of you on the board. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you. We had the opportunity at our Board of County Commissioners meeting on October 12th to bring forward in our partnership cooperative agreement, your fiscal year 22 capital improvement program, which our Board of County Commissioners supported as well. We've also had some fantastic over the years work that we've been doing with the Basin on our stormwater programs here on behalf of the county. Particularly, you guys have been a wonderful partner, most recently on several of our water quality projects, including the West Goodlet Frank Road conversion of septic tanks to formal sewer. The work that we've been doing as well over in our Graceup area off Griffin Road, that we're finishing up the first phase of that here shortly, as well as some additional water quality sampling that you guys have continued to partnership with us over the last several years. And we greatly appreciate that continued support and our water quality initiatives that we do Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Immokalee Lake Trafford Road area as well, that we've been working in coordination with you guys on several wonderful projects from a stormwater management perspective. So again, just want to stop by, say hello, formally introduce myself. We look forward to continuing to work with Lisa and the team. You guys got a great staff member group that works with us each and every day on initiatives that we have here on behalf of the Basin and Collier County as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity to come introduce myself to you all.
Thank you, Matt, for being here and doing that today. We've had a wonderful relationship with the county, and I hope that will continue.
Absolutely. We look forward to it. Thank you.
Aaron, is there anyone else
I have no more public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
in the room or on Zoom?
Neither, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Then that brings us to our first discussion item, which is a Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary update. And we have Brad Jackson on Zoom for this presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Sorry, I can't be there in person today, but fortunately we can do these things remotely now. So it's a pleasure to be here and be able to present the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary update, kind of a next step from the update you guys received in February. And just waiting for my PowerPoint to come up. Is it up on the screen?
Yes, I see it fine.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just start off here on the okay, I just couldn't see it, there's a lag there. Okay, so a little bit of background on the issue and a little bit of history on how, what the issue is and where we're going. So back in October 2018, Corkscrew Audubon, they came to the Big Cypress board and they kind of presented an issue they've observed, a change in their dry season hydro period that they've observed in the last 20 or so years, and they've had a very long period of record there. And so they saw areas that stayed routinely wet were now drying out more often than they used to in the dry season. So they came and presented those findings and asked for some support. So in FY20, the board allocated some cost share funds for us to partner together and work on a modeling project to look at some possible causes to what might be contributing to this change. And that project was kicked off that fiscal year. And just this last February, the Corkscrew Audubon, they came and presented their conclusions from that modeling report and showed kind of some next steps that needed to be done and some possible theories of why things have changed in the area and what things may affect the dry down more than other things. At that point in time, the board, you all requested that we work collaboratively with Audubon and kind of work through the next steps and where do we go from here. So I'll kind of talk through those next steps here briefly and go from there. Next slide, please. So our collaboration, what does that look like? We've kind of started having quarterly meetings with their staff to kind of talk through what are our needs, are things changing, just to kind of keep things on pace. So we're continuing to move forward with this effort. So in those meetings we've had since February, we've identified a series of needs that we need to refine and improve our data set so we can understand what's happening in the area and then be able to insert those changes and that new information into a new modeling tool that we can then look at a bigger regional approach. So some of those include better topography in the region, some more surface water monitoring sites that we need to know what's going on, and then that tool of development I mentioned. So we need to have a regional look at that. So then we can then use this tool to look at different scenarios then form our capital program, look at potential mitigation scenarios, whatever those may be. With that new tool, then we can look at what those projects and what their impacts might be in bird rookery, Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, downstream, and all around. Next slide, please. So the regional topographic data improvement. We know this area is heavily wooded. It's wet most of the year, and so the LiDAR information, the kind of view of the ground surface elevation that our model sees, may be a little suspect just because of the limitations of LiDAR. So during the project, the cost share project, Corkscrew Audubon actually put together and did some survey transects, some spot checks to see how off the ground elevation was. So that pilot project really looked like it confirmed the need for additional information. There were areas that were significantly different from what the model sees and what the real world is. So with that information in hand, we have a budget line item in our BCB budget for this current fiscal year for $200,000. And we're currently developing that scope of work with our surveyors in-house and our consultants. It's a large area that we want to look at. And on the right, it's kind of the shaded region. That's the whole kind of crew area we want to focus in on. We obviously can't survey every corner of that. So we picked some areas that we thought would be the highest priority. So we prioritized about 22 miles of kind of corridors we want to cut through there. And those are the kind of orange gray lines that cut right through the middle area of the swamp, and ultimately end up going all the way down to the Kokohachi Canal. We want to understand how that water moves through there. And to do that, we need to understand what the ground surface elevation is. This area is extremely difficult to survey. As I mentioned, it's heavily wooded, cypress, and wet most of the time. So it'll be tough going for the surveyors. But the plan right now, we've got a helicopter reconnaissance flight scheduled for this next month with our surveyors, so we can kind of scope out where exactly and refine these transects a little bit more. And we'll be performing this work this coming dry season, having a new surface model that we can then work with. Next slide, please. So in addition to just the surveying, we've also had a kind of a gap in our surface water monitoring. Our elevations were off, but we also didn't know exactly what the water elevations were either. And so just similarly to the pilot project for survey, there's also been a project level monitoring that Corkscrew Audubon installed with their project, some on their land, some in the district's land as well. And on the right, those are the green dots. So those were put in just this last summer, and those are currently active and collecting data. So they put those in to help get us a better network of monitoring sites, and that will complement the existing district monitoring. We have 8 sites out there that are some water control sites or control structures, and then also just surface water. So we kind of get a section there. We've identified 5 more locations where we want to have a permanent and publicly available monitoring site. So we had money in our capital program to do these under the SCADA replacements or the SCADA improvements line item. Fortunately, we actually gave USGS a call and say if they wanted to partner with us. We have a good partnership with USGS throughout the district, and this seemed like it might be an opportunity to build on that partnership and give us some additional sites more quickly and maybe more cost effectively. So those on this slide are the dark blue sites, and those will be the permanent sites that we're going to work with USGS on. And there's a significant time and cost savings there. Our current quote from them is about $165,000 or so, which is a huge savings from what we had originally budgeted for our SCADA type structures. And the reason ours are more robust is they control flood control structures that always need to be online and functioning during a storm, a hurricane, anything like that. These, since they're just monitoring sites, they don't need to be quite as robust. So there's some savings of about $260,000 that we can now use on other infrastructure throughout the basin. And the other plus side to that is we get to finish a year earlier with those monitoring sites. The design and installation of our SCADA sites would take a little bit longer due to the budgetary constraints and time needed to design them. USGS, since they're so much less intrusive, so much smaller footprint, they can get those done a little bit quicker, and we'll be able to have those online looking by June. So next wet season, we'll be able to be collecting data. Next slide, please. So to take all that information, the new information we're going to have, we want to look at a regional point of view. Instead of having just one small bits of model that look at one particular item, we want to look at a regional approach. How does what changes happen in the northern part of the system? How does that affect the parts in the southern and the western, and so on and so forth? So we're taking all of these recently developed regional models, and we're kind of stitching them together to create a new tool that we can then use to run scenarios, inform our capital program, et cetera. So some of those models are our flood protection level of service, the South Lee County Watershed Initiative, and then just recently the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary model, among some others. So this new model will then utilize this new topography, the new surface water monitoring data that's been installed through the project level that Corkscrew Audubon installed, and some of the stuff that we're going to do with USGS. It'll use all that information to give us a nice calibrated model that we can then use. So the kickoff for that project just happened in this last September. Our contractor for that, Payson Sawyer, and it's a $830,000 or so contract with them, but it's fairly lengthy. It's a lot of land. It's a lot of modeling to do, and our final completion date is end of 2023. There's some interim milestones, but the final deliverable is 2023. So that kind of sets the stage of when the tool will be available to then run some of these scenarios. Next slide, please. So some of these new scenarios, we'll have to use this new tool. And then we've got the upper Corkscrew Canal, the Headwater Improvements. We have a Cork 3 structure that's just on the other side of the road there. You can barely see it. We know it needs to be something bigger and different than what's there now, but we really need this tool to really tell us what's the best thing to put there. Is it just a water control structure or some other type of improvement as well? So then we can see how will that change there affect upstream and downstream, and look at that kind of regional approach. And all of that Corkscrew Canal Headwater, that aligns with our capital program. So there's money scheduled to come in to help do our modeling scenarios, design and construction in those coming years for that project. And then if that, there's also that tools there, we can run additional scenarios if we need to or want to look at what other things could be done in bird rookery or in other regions that are of interest to help complement some of these other Corkscrew Canal Headwater improvements. So that said, that kind of sets the stage from, continue this collaborative work together, and then we'll continue to meet quarterly and keep our modeling and all of these initiatives moving forward to help us figure out what's going on up there and continue to move forward. Next slide, please. And I believe with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad, for your presentation. Board members, are there any questions for Brad? Go ahead, Andy.
Brad, could you elaborate a little bit of what the contract, the $800,000 contract with somebody in Sawyer? Just give me a highlights of what would be included in that contract.
So it's basically a tool development. It'll produce a new groundwater, surface water integrated model for that whole region that was shaded up there on the screen.
Yes.
And it will tell us long-term, it would have a long running scenario. So it could tell us average wet season depth, groundwater table, surface water depth. It'll tell us how the environment and how that area will react to potential projects.
Okay, and at some point, I imagine in 2023, when it's completed, they'll be sharing the results with us, or maybe preliminary results over time, so we can gauge what they're doing.
Yeah, so as the scenarios are developed and projects are developed, we can then come and present how those look, and then see what types of effects it would have to the environment and to the flood control system.
Yeah, just want to make sure that's a big ticket items. I just want to make sure that we're getting the maximum amount of value. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Ms. Rivera?
Um, Interesting. My question is also similar to Mr. Hill's. Can we elaborate, or can at some point, can you give us a little bit deeper understanding of the Hayes and Sawyer model on what they've done previously, what kind of scaffolding it is, and whether you can layer other analysis that once the infrastructure of the model, or the what I call the scaffolding of the model, is put in place. So if we wanted to understand how nutrients change throughout the county, it seems like if it's going to be modeled from north to south to west, some of those changes might, how we add or subtract nutrients along the way might be of great interest.
So my understanding of the model is it's more of a water quantity, where and how it goes through the system is mostly the tool that this is used for. As far as the nutrients, I think we might want to look at, there might be other methods. Maybe we can use the tool as kind of a, to help understand the nutrients that you've discussed, but this tool primarily is how water moves from A to B and what effects it would have.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that there is a point of interface between conveyance and change in nutrients that we might be able to extract some learnings from. We can discuss it offline if you want. Thanks.
Okay, Vice Chair Waters?
So the one thing, probably more a comment than it is a question, that jumped out at me is one of the reasons we know there's a problem is, fortunately, Corkscrew has 50, 60, 70 years, I don't remember, of data. So we're not debating, is there a problem? We know there's a problem and go, all right, how do we fix it? And if we could go back to the map that had the proposed and existing monitoring stations, my kind of thought was, in looking through this, is should we be partnering with, I don't know if it would be Lee County or the district in West Palm Beach, but it seems like I don't know if it's Crew or the Kuiper Preserve, it's a technical name there to the west, but should we be adding more monitoring in that area so that, again, really two things. One, we can see the impact of anything that we might do long-term on those areas and not just sort of stop right at the Lee Collier line. And the area I'm kind of talking about is the area outlined in yellow. It's kind of got a different aerial, so it's got a lighter shade to it. But should we pick up more data in that area for two reasons? One, then we can calibrate the things we do and what impact does it have on that. And then secondly, would give an opportunity as these things go. Typically, people take these models and they build on them. And so they'll take the model that we're doing here and somebody will pick that up and use it for a different purpose. And we would have good calibrated information when somebody else does that to go that direction. But also, a little bit outside of kind of what our charge is up here, but the area on the south side of or all of that Corkscrew Road corridor going east of I-75 is changing very quickly. And so the same kind of data Corkscrew Swamp has for years, we can see what's happening within either, whether it's the Kuiper Preserve or the Crew lands as a result of how things are changing. So just something I think would be worthy of thinking about, maybe partnering with Lee County or the district in West Palm Beach as we go forward with this.
Right. Madam Chair, I think we are working with Lee County. They're involved right now in their South Lee watershed study. And so there's many meetings, and I think that provides us the opportunity to continue working with them on that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Is that all, Dan?
Yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Yeah, that was a good point you raised, because we have to look at things regionally when we have the opportunity to do so. So that we just, if we have to add another phase or, to the project or whatever the case may be, that needs to be on the table, I think. Brad, I have a couple of questions. One, I really want to commend you and the partners who collaborated to reach out to the USGS to make that money-saving effort and time-saving effort. That's exactly what success looks like, when you can save money with a project and you can save time at the same case and get things done. So hats off to you. What I'd like to ask you is, have you formulated the timeline for this effort? Meaning what you hope to accomplish by what date? And because that speaks to Andy's point about reporting back to the board, but is there a timeline for this particular project that you've developed so far, or is that to be developed?
Sure. So we do have a specified schedule in our contract with our consultant. Then the biggest and longest portion of it is the calibration and setup and getting all the pieces put together, and that really takes some time to do all that information, to stitch all of these together. We do have kind of an interim milestone. It's probably 6 months earlier than the final completion date, where we might have the kind of the inside look at what that model may provide for us. So, move that forward, mid-summer 2023 would be probably a point where we might be able to use the tool from a preliminary standpoint to look at some things with. And then we would then run through kind of our design storm scenarios after that point in time. And that would get us to the conclusion. And then moving forward from that, at that point, we could then start to run some scenarios and brainstorm some projects once that modeling tool is complete, sometime in that mid to late 2023 timeframe.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking maybe if not, the highly technical engineering items that some of which you described in your presentation, but maybe an executive summary of the milestones might be helpful to this board, so that we can kind of know what's out there and what we hope to expect. And I think that will be helpful to anyone who's interested in this, which there is a lot of interest in Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and what we're doing in this area. I think it'll be helpful. Are there any other questions of Brad from the board? If not, we'll go to public comment. Erin, is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the room, I have Brad Cornell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. Thanks for entertaining my comments on this. And I'm Brad Cornell on behalf of Audubon, Florida and Audubon Western Everglades. And first, I want to say thank you very much to you all and to your staff. Brad Jackson and Lisa Keeler have been leading an excellent collaboration with us at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and with the consultants, and the team has come up with what we think is some really positive and important next steps that are going to lead to solutions. And I mean, Madam Chair, that's the point I think of you're asking about. The timeline is where are the solutions coming in this process? Because everybody loves data, but not only to a point, only data that are useful, and to what end are they useful? So I appreciate very much, Audubon appreciates very much the collaboration that we have with you all. This is absolutely critical. And it's also critical for the regional application that this presents, because we don't think that we are the only ones suffering the dry season drawdowns. We think that the larger Golden Gate estates and Eastern Collier County watersheds, even out to Big Cypress, are suffering some of these same drawdowns relative to the infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure that are pervasive in our landscape. And how are we going to balance that issue? I want to address, I also, first I need to say that our research director, Sean Clem, is just about to get on the Zoom. She had a conflict at 1 o'clock that was going till 2 o'clock. So she may come on and retroactively add some additional comments that I'm not going to scoop. So if she doesn't, then I'll add those at the later public comment point. But I did want to respond to Dan Waters is bringing up this issue of, are there other places that we want to be looking at? And recognizing that this is a regional issue, you're looking at a really large regional model with your consultant that just kicked off. And I think that's the point. And there's an area called the Critical Southern Crew Project, or Southern Crew, that you've completed a restoration project, which has been a wonderful outcome. However, that's a very, there's more opportunity in that watershed, the Eastern Bonita Springs watershed. And as you have probably heard, Lee County and Bonita Springs are very unhappy with the flooding that occurs regularly with storms in East Bonita Springs. Partly that's because there's ill-sited development. You can't put houses in floodplains and expect them not to flood. So that's one issue. But the other issue is that we have more restoration opportunities in the Southern Crew area in Eastern Bonita Springs. So if I may have just a couple more seconds, I just
Wrap
wanted
it
to.
up. Yes, go ahead, Brad.
Thank you. The issue that is relevant here is that, as Lisa Keeler said, there is a coordination process going on with Lee County, but this may also help in perhaps an MOU that could be forged between the district, Big Cypress Basin, and Lee County on restoration that would not only be hydrologic restoration, it would also be flood protection of a natural variety, of a hydrologic restoration variety. And this might help satisfy some of the unhappiness and desires of Bonita Springs and Lee County to do more flood protection, but also do restoration. So if I can throw that on the table, this kind of leads to that, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else, Aaron?
I have no more public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Dr. Clem didn't make it with her hand raised, so I see. So, okay, great. So any other comment from the board before we move on? Go ahead. Erin, did you have something?
If you'd like, she did just raise her hand, or we can wait till,
No, it's appropriate here for her to speak.
okay.
Sorry about that. I am just running back in the door here, but I did hear, at the end of that, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to make some comments here. I just wanted to reinforce what Brad Cornell just said, in that, we're very appreciative of the effort that the BCB has made to move forward on some of those suggested, efforts to fill holes in the
I think we lost Dr. Clem.
filling data holes. The first was increased monitoring, and we've had a great relationship with the district in getting some temporary fixes in place, and then moving forward with, as Brad explained, the long-term plan to put those bigger stations in. We're really happy with the effort on the topography work that is going to be moving forward. And then the third piece of our recommendation was, just better understanding the hydrogeology in that region. And we recently got some funding from the Community Foundation of Naples that we'd like to use to do some of that initial work and do some, borings to better understand the hydrogeology. And I guess I just wanted to take this opportunity just to ask and to reinforce that, we are able to get some, support to be able to move forward in that, in terms of, permitting and access and, site access and things like that, in order to help fill some of that, fill that data gap, so that we can move forward in better understanding the system, so that we can, engineer whatever solutions, or, come up with whatever solutions we need to correct the over drainage. So just a note of thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work together, and are really we'll be looking for some support from the district in being able to get access to do some of that hydrogeologic exploration, both within the sanctuary, and hopefully also within Bird River Swamp.
Thank you, Dr. Clem, for your comments and for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment, Erin?
I have no more public comment, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Great. Well, that was a good discussion. And let's move on now to the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Siting Analysis with Sean Meyer.
Good afternoon, board members. Sean Meyer, the lead project manager for the Big Cypress Basin. I'm here today to discuss the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Siting Analysis that will be taking place over the next couple of months. This presentation is merely informative in nature. There's no board decision needed. But first, I want to give you just a little bit of background information and set the stage for the siting analysis. I want to take a minute to discuss the water quality feasibility study that was completed this past spring and draw your attention to the map on the right specifically, and just make a point of distinction between the feasibility study and the Picayune Strand Restoration Project shown in the hashed red area. This feasibility study really didn't have a whole lot to do with the water coming off of the Picayune Strand Restoration Project per se. This really came about as questions and concerns were raised from local stakeholders centering around existing as well as future upstream flows that are or will be coming under US Highway 41 and into areas of outstanding Florida waters. So to address these concerns, a collaborative approach was taken to look at these current and future flows from the watershed north of US 41. The goal was to identify projects that would improve water quality as it flowed to downstream areas of the outstanding Florida waters, particularly Collier-Seminole State Park, Rookery Bay Estuarine Research Reserve, and the Cape Romano 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge. This feasibility study kicked off in July of 2020, and as I said previously, was completed this past spring. Now, a project one-pager was developed, which summarized these water quality options and alternatives with different treatment components, depending on the amount of available land size. So you have this list of water quality projects. The next natural question would be, where are we going to implement them? Do we have a spot to be able to implement them? One of the 4 recommendations from the feasibility study was to conduct a siting analysis to look for potentially available land on which to implement one of these water quality projects. So this takes us into the siting analysis. This serves as the next step and a follow-up to the feasibility study. The purpose of this is to determine, as I said, if there's potentially available land within the project area, which is shown in the map on the right, to implement one of the water quality projects. Now, I'll get into more specifics of the siting analysis itself in just a couple of minutes. But I wanted to take just a minute to acknowledge our stakeholders as members of the technical working group for the project. These members also served a valuable role in the feasibility study, providing expertise and valuable comments, and they will serve in that same role for the upcoming siting analysis. So moving into the siting analysis itself, I broke this project down into 3 chronological stages. So the kickoff meeting for the siting analysis actually occurred last Friday. This was the first technical working group meeting, gave them an opportunity to get together, meet everybody again, and discuss the details of the project. Our consultant, Stantec, is currently in the early stages of establishing an initial list of parcels. Once this list is compiled, criteria will be developed to help narrow the list of candidates down a little bit further. Then a desktop analysis will be performed and additional criteria will be looked at, and they will use this to narrow that list down once again. From that, a preliminary draft report will be composed, and it will include details of all of the work completed to that point, as well as an initial ranking table of all the remaining candidates. Then the second meeting with the technical working group will occur. They will be presented the preliminary draft report. Then they will be given about 2 to 3 weeks to review and provide comments on that draft report. Those comments will be incorporated into assisting moving on to the next step. So this next step takes us into the beginning of 2022. So we've got the preliminary draft report and those initial rankings have been developed. So at this point, several things are going to occur next. Preliminary conversations will occur with property owners of the remaining candidate parcels. If granted permission, site walks will occur by an ecologist to do an environmental assessment of the area. That environmental assessment will look at any potential threatened, protected, or endangered animals or plants in the area, and then soil composition and vegetative type will also be looked at. Once all these evaluations are complete, a schematic design will be produced for each candidate parcel or parcel area remaining, and it will outline a potential water quality treatment option for each of the remaining candidates. In addition, cost estimates and potential water quality benefits will be calculated for each scenario. So we take the results of the environmental and engineering analysis, and then we're going to use this to rank those remaining candidate areas, and then we'll use that to compose the draft report. So as before, this draft report will be presented to the technical working group at their third meeting in April. And then following that, again, they'll have 2 weeks to provide comments. And then those comments, again, will be incorporated into what will eventually be the final report. So that takes us into the final stage of the project. And this is really about wrapping the project up. So the final report will be produced. Again, it's a summation of everything completed to date. And it also compiles all comments and review comments from the technical working group. And then in addition, the final ranking of parcel or parcel areas will also be determined at this stage. And then lastly, this information will be brought to you at a future board meeting to discuss the final report, as well as present those final rankings to you. And with that, I will take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Sean from the board? Andy, go ahead.
Sean, a number of questions. Sorry, this is a project that's of personal interest to me, but let's just start off with, how do you define them? What will they be looking at in terms of water quality? Just briefly, like what would they be? What would they?
Specifically total nitrogen and total phosphorus, among other things.
Okay. Well, those are two that I don't like very much in water. The other question that I have is, how wide a spectrum will they be evaluating the potential impacts of the Picayune Strand, which, I mean, up to Marco Island, south deep into the Everglades? I assume that the water will have impact in a wide spectrum of areas, I think, but I'm not an engineer, or I'm just a business guy.
Right. Well, and we expect, so they're in the very early stages of developing all of this. So I don't have those answers for you right now, but a lot of that stuff will unfold as the project progresses.
Yeah, I'll be looking for to see how wide they go, and I don't know what that adds to the cost, but it is certainly a project that has potential to benefit a significant portion of Southwest Florida and the Everglades. So, thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Waters?
So just in looking at this, it mentions, part part of this is going to be a ranking of these various sites. Do we have criteria established yet for how we're going to do that? Will it be just simply kind of efficiency, and so the cost to construct and operate and pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus removed, or might it be what has the most potential? Just curious whether we have kind of defined how we want to rank this stuff. And then the other question would be, and it sort of follows on Mr. Hill's, is once we do design this, do we want to establish, even though there isn't necessarily a numeric criteria, at least based on, I read through the report again last night, and it's all kind of narrative stuff. Once we've done a design, do we want to establish a threshold for the discharge and say, okay, if it meets this standard, we know it's working, and if it doesn't, we need to improve it and change something. So curious your thoughts on those two items.
So the second question, and I'll probably ask you to repeat your first, I'm sorry. The second question, it's hard for me to provide an answer on that, to be honest, because it's a little bit outside my area of expertise.
Yeah, and it may be
honest.
something we just, once we come back with a final design, that is something we want to talk about and evaluate at that point. And then the first one was, have we selected the criteria in terms of, how are we going to benchmark these in terms of ranking? Is it efficiency, just greatest potential? How would we look at that?
So we haven't gotten there yet. They have the initial search area that I showed. They have started to compile that list of parcels. And then actually here in the coming weeks, I believe they will be starting to dive into what you're talking about and developing those criteria to narrow those lists down.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm sure it's going to be more complicated than, just sitting here and being as simple as I am saying, pounds removed per dollar cost, because the way you can treat will probably be different on different parcels. So
yes, it's a pretty complex, method of getting things narrowed down, I believe, but I know a lot of that will unfold as the project goes. We're just not there yet.
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I think that one of the things that the feasibility study highlighted was the fact that the top limiting factor on this is the land availability. So based upon land availability will give us the options, the suite of options that we can use to address improving the water quality before it's discharged into outstanding Florida waters. So one of the things that the study pointed out is that land is at a premium in the area where we need it. So that may dictate what kind of projects and what thresholds we can achieve. Ms. Rivera.
Piggybacking on your comment just now, given that that is a challenge, land availability, and the intent is to remove the pollutants before it reaches the estuary. Correct me, I may be not thinking through this correctly, but isn't all this water coming through 3 pinch points at the pump stations where we initiate the sheet flow?
I'd have to look, to be honest.
Well,
and
If I can help. So are you talking about the top of Picayune?
Yeah.
Because this project is really focusing on what's happening south of
bottom.
41.
But that water is the same water that we
Right,
put,
it
that we
starts
fed
right-
at the top at the pinch points.
Right.
So-
it starts
so
in
if we
North Golden
can-
Gate Estates.
Yeah, so it may be that in parallel, or at least an exploration would be to the cost and the feasibility of removing a certain amount of nutrients at the pinch points and then let it flow to continue its process of aeration and of quality improvement before it reaches the saltwater. Because there are other benefits to this entire project, which is reducing saltwater intrusion, going back to our natural swamp status. But the whole object of this exercise is to remove the nutrients, right?
The objective of this project is to look for land available to possibly do that, which you are talking about in the future. But the main objective of this is merely looking for land to house one of those water quality projects.
Madam Chair, if I can maybe also offer an answer. The water, as Sean had said right at the very beginning, excuse me, this isn't about the quality of the water coming off of the Picayune Strand project. That's not the focus.
Okay,
Okay, so it's the water that's coming out of Golden Gate Estates and coming through the pump stations. The water quality there is not an issue.
okay, got it. It's a project definition. Right.
Anything else, Nanette? Was that it? Okay, great. All right, let's go to public comment. Aaron, do we have any public comment for this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Up first, I have Meredith Budd, followed by Brad Cornell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, Meredith Budd on behalf of the Florida Wildlife Federation. The Federation is grateful for the opportunity to have been a part of the water quality feasibility study and now a part of the siting analysis as well on that technical group. I want to note that the Picayune Strand Restoration Project water quality feasibility study points out in the beginning of the study that the Picayune Strand, obviously north of the study area for the feasibility study, as well as the siting analysis, will increase the flows from north of US 41 into those outstanding Florida waters. So given the importance of those OFWs, obviously, this is the primary reason for the water quality feasibility study and now the subsequent siting analysis that's being done now. We participated in the kickoff that just happened, so thank you so much for hosting. And a major comment and needed component of ensuring the integrity of those outstanding Florida waters, to your point, Ms. Rivera, is that, and it's not being addressed in this study, is that there is a need for a parallel initiative to address the pollution source. Those pollutants are coming from somewhere and they're ending up going to be pushed in increased flows into those outstanding Florida waters. This is critical. Florida Wildlife Federation and my other colleagues, Audubon, Conservancy, we have all been noting this throughout the process. And the need for this parallel project, we wish it would have been included as a component of this next step within the scope of this next step, which is the siting analysis that they are doing. So that is something to still keep top of mind. It's necessary. It might not be a part of this component, but it's certainly something that needs to be done in the future and a part of another parallel project that can be done alongside this water quality project that's being conducted. Also, the study will certainly help point out and better understand what the cost estimates are going to look like for effectuating a project like this. But looking forward into funding mechanisms, funding partnerships is really paramount, so that once everything's tied up in a bow and everything has been decided on, expediting the fix can be done effectively. And so just having the foresight to consider those funding options and needs is critical. So I appreciate the time and thank you so much again for the Federation's representation in this project.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair and board members. Brad Cornell with Audubon, Western Everglades and Audubon, Florida. I guess, well, first I'll say that this is great that we're working on actual water quality cleanups for this area. The measured phosphorus content of the water at the point at which they're going to install better culverts is about 300 parts per billion. The standard for the Everglades is 10 parts per billion. So we're quite a bit over what we really want to be at. And as has been noted, we have outstanding Florida waters that are downstream from that water. So the water that's being added from restoration is good, as Lisa Keeler noted, But there's other water that's coming off of urban development and farms in this immediate vicinity, and transportation, the road itself, that is problematic. So I want to echo my colleague Meredith Budd's comment that we really need to be looking at source control. And Nanette Rivera brought this question up about source control, and it is very relevant. We do want to have a parallel process. And the reason we want to have a parallel process rather than one that follows, if we can reduce the source of nitrogen and phosphorus in particular, then we can reduce the amount of land we need in the siting process. The more you reduce the source, the less cleanup you have to do downstream. The less land, the less money you're going to spend on cleanups. That's a very understood engineering and economic principle, ecological principle. So that's why we're emphasizing the need for a parallel process. And if I may suggest, I think the Big Cypress Basin, as much as anybody else, could host this parallel dialogue. And it really should be a dialogue with the farmers, with Collier County and urban development, with FDOT and transportation, with FDACS, the Department of Agriculture and Community Services. These are the players that should sit around the table and figure out, well, how about cost share best management practices? Maybe that would be a logical strategy for incentivizing farmers and homeowners to reduce their nutrients. But you all would be in a good position to host that dialogue, and if I could urge you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Up next on Zoom, I have Paul Julian, followed by Andrew Tyler.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
Can I get a mic check?
You're good. I hear you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Paul Julian, Conservancy of Southwest Florida and SCCF. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I would also thank the prior commenters for some valuable feedback there and background. We really applaud the district's effort in trying a solution to solve this water quality issue in this particular area. I was a member of the feasibility study back when it kicked off, and now I'm a member of this siting analysis, which is encouraging. Just like the prior commenters, I would like to encourage potential investigation and nutrient source identification. That way we can get a little bit better idea and more accurate sizing of these projects. This information will provide a lot of valuable information in trying to get the right size of the project and not overbuilding or underbuilding anything. I'd like to remind everybody that the 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge, Collier Seminole State Park, and Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve downstream, they're all OFWs, or Outstanding Florida Waters. They were designated particularly for their ecological characteristics and in an effort to try to conserve that land. They were offered or afforded particular protections. In the feasibility study, it was mentioned that these lands, particularly Collier Seminole State Park, would be an appropriate site for this project. I want to encourage that these lands, including Collier Seminole State Park, should not be included as a potential site. These lands were set aside, like I said, as an OFW for conservation purposes and not to be used for treatment of waters of the state. Mentioning Vice Chair Waters' comment about downstream numeric nutrient criteria or criterion in general, his question, we do have downstream numeric nutrient criteria for the estuaries. So the water that would be leaving these projects get into the very close near shore environment where we do have numeric nutrient criteria established. While it's not the Everglades 10, it's about, I believe it's for phosphorus at least, I think it's about a 50 parts per billion limit in that general vicinity. So this project, we really encourage it. It's great. I'm glad to see we're moving forward. And we do have a to water. So thanks again, and look forward to the project as it develops.
Thank you for your comment. And next, Aaron, who's next?
Yes, Paul Julian.
He just spoke.
I'm so sorry. It's Andrew Tyler.
Okay, Mr. Tyler?
Mr. Tyler, are you there? If you could unmute yourself. Mr. Tyler?
Have we lost Mr. Tyler?
I think so.
I'm
Okay.
wondering if you may have me mixed up with Mr. Tyler. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
Go ahead. Please identify
Um,
yourself and go ahead.
Hi, Charlotte. It's Bob Roth, actually.
All right, Mr. Roth, good to have you this afternoon.
Hi. Andrew, who's a friend of mine, was going to be watching this. And when I heard his name come up, I thought he was the speaker. But somehow our computers must be linked because he and I both sat in on the Picayune presentation a year ago. And somehow his name came up when it was actually my computer. So it was not that funny. I'm actually up in Cape Cod right now, having just gone through a northeaster. But I'll be back to Florida next Tuesday for good. So I just had a comment, and I would like to echo Brad from the Audubon and the woman who spoke before him, and also Paul Julian, who just spoke, that these studies are all well and good, that they're dealing with water quality on the downstream end of a very large water basin, drainage basin, but nobody is really focusing on where these nutrients are coming from. And to say it's the stormwater coming out of Golden Gate area, well, that's fine, but we should be maybe doing something about the stormwater at Golden Gate area coming out. So I just really wanted to echo those comments. I hadn't planned to speak. I really wanted to watch, but when I heard those people that I believe are on the same page as me, I wanted to just stress my agreement with that. So, there should be a parallel study going on so we can deal with the source, so we don't have to deal with it almost at the mouth of the river before it goes into the Everglade area there. So anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it.
I have no more public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that was cleared up. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean, for the excellent presentation. We'll move on now to item number 9, which is our proposed communication tower for enhanced communications for flood control. And we have Dwayne Piper from West Palm Beach here today. Welcome, Dwayne.
Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow BCB board members. It's my pleasure to be here. I've been involved with the expansion of our microwave system, which is the backbone of our communications, for quite some time. And I'm here to give an informational update and answer any questions about our proposed tower and tell you why we think it's advantageous to construct a new tower in the Lake Tafford area. So it's long time been a part of our strategy to expand into the west, and we're going to call it a western spur, to improve the reliability in this area. And we'll find that, back in 2014, we started down this path with improving our supervisory control and data acquisition, our SCADA system communications, by doing some simple upgrades. And we added some cellular communication to give us the ability to monitor sites and get some readings using cellular modems that connect through the same cell phone towers that we use for our phones. But then Hurricane Irma happened. And when Hurricane Irma happened, it revealed some failures in the system. For one, the cellular system failed. And the backup system was through third-party network providers that also failed. So the main network provider, the roof caved in with water damage. So the two redundant systems failed at that time. it could have been worse, but what it happened to our staff is we had to send staff out to get water readings physically to read the water levels, where they could have been instead continuing with damage assessment and doing debris removal. So it just took their time away from other important tasks. And the result was that our BCB service center couldn't see the sites, and that was really problematic, as you can imagine. So we're doing some improvements. So instead of the cellular system, we replaced those with radio frequency, or RF, and that involved installing 6 60-foot concrete poles to hold the antennas, and then changing out the communications to use radio frequency, which is much more reliable than the cellular connection. We also added network redundancy to the BCB service center. And that means if one connection went down, we could pick up with another service provider and still have that connectivity and that visibility. The problem is that it's still relying on a third party. So there's still some failure points that we're not in control of. So I want to take a short trip around our current microwave system throughout the district and share how we enjoy the reliability that comes from these microwave towers or communication towers. So if you look at the map to the right, the red dots are the towers. They're owned and operated by us, and we construct them to a higher level standard. So they're very similar to cell towers, but they're constructed to higher standards for withstanding what's called the twist and sway for, I think it's 186 mile an hour gust winds. That's higher than normal hurricane standards, so that, during a storm or just immediately after a storm, we still have communications. At the most, some of our dishes could move and then we have to realign them, but we also put 2 dishes pointing to each site. So these towers are point-to-point communications, which means they have to see each other. And we choose a height that's a standard height that's in the middle that minimizes the number of towers we need. So in other words, we choose about 300 feet towers. And if we had shorter and the antennas were shorter, then our distance, which is about 18 to 22 miles in between towers, would be shorter. And therefore we'd have to have more towers. So if you kind of look at the lower section in light blue lines going between towers, we call that our southern loop on the map to the lower right. And then kind of in the middle with the, I don't know if that's yellowish green color, that's our northern loop, and it goes around the lake. And then shooting up through the Kissimmee Valley is the northern spur with the red lines. So looking left, there's a dotted black line, and some of those have been constructed and some are still not yet connected. And that's what we would like to refer to as a western spur. And the proposed tower in the Lake Trafford area would complete that link, and we'd fill those in, the dotted lines, to being solid. And that would mean that our communications in the western area would enjoy the same reliability as the rest of this microwave network that we have. So specifically, we do have a connection between Moorhaven and C43. And we also have a connection with Fauquier Union and Naples and back to the BCB Service Center. And so the missing link, as it were, is that tower at Lake Trafford. And that would just connect the whole system back together and bring that reliability. Would bring network to Carnegie Road, and not only reliability, but it also allows for future capacity. So if there's other projects, we can add microwave dishes to that tower. And you'll see in a picture later, I'll describe this where the microwave dishes go, but also at the top of the tower are antennas for that radio frequency that we talked about. And the radio frequency gives a circumference around the tower where we can reach out to certain monitoring sites or control structures. And then the microwave dishes bring that data back to headquarters in this loop that we showed on the map. So that's kind of how the whole system works. Now, when we build a tower, all of our new towers are freestanding. There's no guy wires. That's something we do. But we looked at the letter and the recommendations from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we looked at most of those things we can absolutely perform and keep in mind during construction. For example, I said no guy wires, but also we do use FAA approved lighting because it's required for towers between 150 and 300 feet. But we can program those lights to have the minimum intensity, that's the lumens of the lights, the light that they emit. And we can also program the frequency of flashing, and we can minimize those functions because they're programmable. Also, there's a communication shelter at the base of the tower, and that has lighting primarily for security, but we can turn that off and just have it motion activated. So if someone approaches, the lights go on. That's very easy to do. The other thing, we'll definitely do a wildlife survey before clearing the land, and we can schedule clearing the land and construction outside of peak bird nesting season. So we don't see any problem considering those things and other things that were in the recommendations. Now, here's the last slide, but I wanted to include some pictures. The tower to the left is a typical microwave tower. We have a couple of really old towers that are guide wires, but we standardize on freestanding towers quite some time ago. So more than 90% of our towers stand free, as this picture illustrates. So in the middle are the microwave dishes, and they're, I think, between 4 and 6 feet circumference. So you can imagine how heavy they are. And that goes to the base and how the tower and the footing is built. And we did an initial path analysis, and a path analysis is basically analyzing the reliability of the data transfer from one tower to another. And we require our vendors to certify that it's 5 nines, which is 99.9997 uptime reliability. And so what we do is we do an initial study in-house, and we determine the height of the microwave dish, and we determine to about 220 feet. And then when we put this out to bid, we require the vendor to guarantee a 99, 5 nines uptime. And so they design it to meet that criteria for us. And of course, we hold them to that. Then the next picture in the middle is the microwave shelter. And that's built, of course, to hurricane standards. It's up to 235 mile-an-hour gust winds. It has air conditioning because it's full of electronics. It also has redundant generator. So if it loses power, the generator continue operating for some amount of time. So that's the microwave shelter. Then to the right is the top of the tower. And the top of the tower has the radio frequency, or RF antennas. And that being at the top of the tower gives us the broadest distance or coverage for radio frequency. And that's important because, of course, if you don't get a wider circumference, you can't reach certain areas, and you just simply have to put up either another shorter tower, like a 90-foot tower somewhere, or you just have to have more infrastructure to cover the area that you're seeking to cover. So that's and the FAA light is there at the top. And of course, that's required. So that's how we construct the towers, the reliability that it provides us. And this proposed tower at Lake Trafford really does complete the missing link, so that the BCB area can enjoy that uptime and reliability that we have throughout the rest of the network. And so in FY22, we have budgeted already to do that path analysis I discussed, to submit for DEP and county permitting. And part of that permitting will include a variance to construct the tower at 300 feet. And it's not a commercial tower like a radio tower that could be 500 or 600 feet. So we do minimize that. It's important to us, but we also want to keep the minimum number of towers down. So we've standardized at that height, which will require a variance. And we'll complete design this year. And then so our hope is that next year, we budget $2 million to construct the tower and the shelter building. And then the following year, we budget $1.8 million for the microwave radios, the dishes, all the electronics and the wiring. Then the vendor will test it, and we'll work with them to put it into operation and commission the system. Brings the total project budget to about $4 million. And it really solves a longstanding strategy to bring reliability for microwave communications to this area. And that concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dwayne. That certainly is the missing link, just like you presented it. And I'm sure Dan, having been here through Irma, remembers some of that challenge that we faced.
Spoke to Lisa, and the analogy was it was like the cellular system was like a seatbelt that worked fine unless we were in a crash, and then it didn't work. So yeah, it's expensive, but I think we have to do it, to be honest.
That's a good description. Are there any board questions or comments for Dwayne? Go ahead, Andy.
Quick, what's been the experience with impact upon wildlife? Obviously, birds come to mind. And do you monitor? You have a whole bunch of towers already. What's the experience, and is there an adequate program to monitor for problems?
I would have to get back to you on that because I don't have a precise answer. We've noticed that there are nesting around our towers. I don't think we have numbers of any deceased wildlife around the shelter, but when our guys go out and do maintenance, we do notice that they're there and living in conjunction with it. And what I've learned personally is that the guide wires were the biggest issue. I understand that the flashing lights could be an issue at night, but it will minimize that with the intensity of the light.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? We have public comment on this item.
Yes, Madam Chair. In the room, I have Meredith Budd.
Good afternoon again, Meredith Budd on behalf of the Florida Wildlife Federation. Just a couple of things, I'll be brief. I just want to really thank staff because they came to the Florida Wildlife Federation and my colleague at Audubon and spoke to us about this project in advance to get our opinions, our thoughts, and our expertise on being compatible with wildlife. So we appreciate the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service consistency with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recommendations. I do want to note that they do recommend for wildlife to be no taller than 199 feet. And so this tower is proposed to be taller than that. I understand there are circumstances needed in order to accommodate the bridging that gap between the locations of the towers that necessitates the height. But I do want to point out that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does note that height being 199 feet for wildlife. But other than that, I really just want to commend staff for coming to our organizations and making us aware of it and taking our comments and feedback and incorporating it into their proposal. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Meredith.
I have no more public comment, Madam Chair.
Well, I'm just disappointed that it's 2 years away before we actually start using the tower, but I understand that things take time and that's the timeline that we're on, but it's certainly very, very necessary for the Big Cypress Basin to be tied into this communication system that's district-wide. And Dwayne, I want to thank you for coming over and making the presentation. For those of you who may not know, Dwayne is the head of our technology throughout the South Florida Water Management District, and he covers 16 counties with him and his staff taking care of us. And when we had to change operations immediately after COVID and we had to go to a virtual world, you wouldn't even know it. He was so well prepared with his whole team. So thank you for being here today and appreciate everything you do district-wide. Thank you.
I'll pass it to the team.
All right, next up is our fiscal year 2022-23 preliminary budget discussion with Candy Heater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So today I'm going to discuss your 2023 preliminary budget. October is when we kick these discussions off, but well before that, your Basin Administrator, Ms. Keeler, and several of the other staff members throughout the district start working on your preliminary budget to get us to the point to be able to present in front of you a balanced budget. So to go over the milestones, I like to open with this to see, what we have before us, as well as to notate those statutory requirements. Today sets us up for success to be able to submit our preliminary budget, which is statutorily required by January 15th to the legislature, as well as the governor. February 14th, if we have any updates, or the board would like an update on the budget process for the Basin budget, we will bring back another budget update in February. March, legislative comments are due on the overall district's budget, which includes the Big Cypress Basin's preliminary budget. And then April as well, come back with discussions on the budget. Those discussions that I'd mentioned in February and then in April lead us up to the tentative cycle. So the tentative cycle is in July, when we receive our taxable values, July 1. And then that prepares us for our next statutory requirement of a budget submittal August 1. And that budget goes to the governor's office as well as the legislature, and then come back at the end of August for the final millage and budget approval by the Basin Board. So the budget that you have before you today, again, which is for the fiscal year 2022-23, and it being a preliminary budget, is a $14.7 million budget. That, compared to the adopted budget that you just approved in August for fiscal year 21-22, is being $17.4 million. It is a $2.8 million reduction. And as we get through the presentation, you will see that that is driven by your capital projects, which is a normal trend due to how capital projects ramp up, ramp down, bring on new projects, design, ramping up and ramping down. The revenues are fairly consistent. Staff sees no concerns with the revenues in accordance to the projected needs or expenditures right now for the preliminary budget submittals that came from your staff to support the basin activities. The budget is for the ad valorem taxes. It remains the largest portion of the revenue to support the basin's activities. There is a conservative increase of about $100,000 because at this time we do not have the EDR's presentation that basically gives us, who are the economists for the state, that gives us the guidance of what we should expect as growth within our counties, particularly here in Collier County. If you recall, Collier County did have close to almost 6% growth or increase from the 20 taxable values to the 21 taxable values in January that we used to build the 22 budget, which brought in a little over $290,000 extra. So again, the 100,000 is conservative for these purposes today. The investment income, we did reduce your investment income from 110,000 to 60,000 due to, what is transpiring in the market, and as well as what's the trends are showing right now with the actuals that you will see on your monthly financial report later on. So we thought that it would be conservative to start out preliminary discussions with less revenue, not knowing exactly 2 years from now what may transpire in the market. Your fund balance, you'll see that your fund balance, there's less usage of fund balance in the 22 budget, 6 million, and then in the 23 budget projected of about 3.3. And again, that's based on capital. So for those who prefer to see charts versus pie charts, this staff includes this into the presentation, which is basically a repeat of those pie charts, but it does give explanations that I'd briefly discussed with you of the pluses and the minuses compared to the adopted budget and where we are now with the preliminary. So where the money goes, again, it's a balanced budget. The expenditures or the money requests or the needs are about $14.7 million. Again, very consistent with the usages, being flood control as well as the capital projects. You see also that the reserves remains at $2 million, which is, basin policy and district policy that to keep the reserves at $2 million. The area that shows the decrease, like I had mentioned, is within the capital projects. You'll see it went from 39% down to 28%. The remaining areas are pretty consistent. And I'll move to the next chart because it makes it a little easier for discussions and for the eye when it comes to the pluses and minuses for these categories, these expenditure categories, since there's, a fairly large amount of them. So again, flood control, there is a small decrease from 22 to 23. You do see an increase of about 192,000, which is planned right now for your field equipment and fleet replacement. And the reason being is that there was no money adopted for the fleet and field equipment because your staff felt that they did not really need to, proceed with any funding within the field and fleet equipment program. The 192,000, they did reduce it from their original plan down to the 192,000 with a couple of purchases, one being for Truxer, which is a mechanical harvester for flood control purposes. You do see another $150,000 increase within the land stewardship budget, and that is due to some maintenance activities for culvert replacements within the Bird Rookery Swamp. And then a reduction of about $300,000 due to, in this year's budget, there's funding for the Picayune water quality treatment site analysis, which is to be completed this year. Again, the capital program shows the $2.8 million change or reduction. Again, not driven by sources, but driven according to the schedules of the projects. You see here, no dollars are planned for the Cypress 1 structure as well as electrification remote operations for the 23 budget. And that is because those are pegged to be completed this year, which is fabulous. And you heard that Dwayne just gave a very nice presentation on the remote monitoring communications. And then your structure inspection program, this is year 1 of year 2, where they do 2 years of inspections and then they're off, and then they go 2 years off cycle. So next steps. Today would like to, staff would like to have comments back from the Basin Board or direction of any changes that you would like to have incorporated or removed from the budget before we do submit to the governor's office for the preliminary budget. And then the next steps being to submit, as I'd mentioned, to the governor's office by January 15th, and then come back to the Basin Board and report to you any changes from the numbers that you see today, as well as then to continue to refine those budgets, revenues, and expenditures until we get to the tentative and final timeframe. And that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Candy. I really appreciate all the work you and your staff have done to bring us to this point. Are there any questions from the board for Candy at this time? Andy?
Just digging into things and just, I was just doing some quick numbers calculation. If we get a 5% increase in value, property values, I don't think that computes to a 5% increase in our ad valorem tax revenues, or will it? It'd be about $500,000.
So the reason being why it's not a straight 5% or 6%, that you can't take that 5% or 6%
It's too simple.
and multiply it, is because of how right now, how we've been doing rollback and how rollback works.
I understand.
So rollback allows you to take the new construction growth, but then your base is rolled back based on, prior year values.
Okay, so we have that. Digging into fleet equipment, that's, I think we talked about this earlier this week, but just that was for some mechanical harvesting.
Sir.
And so that gets rid of all the weeds in the canal system, in simple terms, or I don't know if you run that equipment yourself.
So while I run that equipment myself, yes, no, we do have the expert in the room, Jesus, but before I stood in front of you, I did look it up and read about it.
Okay.
But I'll
If I could help, I mean, certainly Jesus is there and you can bring him up, but I think just as a quick answer, it does help with canal maintenance. It does help remove vegetation in the canals. Our vegetation program is a multi-pronged approach. It's not just the Truxor piece of equipment that's going to be purchased. There's still other ways to manage that, but that will be one of the tools in the toolbox.
Okay, and that would that minimize the amount of chemical, if you do use any chemical weed controls?
I think that is the desire.
Okay, because I'd rather buy equipment that would last forever rather than a one and done with chemicals, which we know isn't good. I think that's the extent of my questions. And we talked about the issue of things costing inflationary. And I don't know how you have built this because it looks like your operating expenditures are due to go down. And I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
So the reason why those operating expenses show a decline from 24 to 25 is that we have a multi-year contract with the county that ends in 24. So
Okay.
there's about $1 million then that comes back for the board to be able to allocate.
Yeah, well, I think I wouldn't be surprised if the property values go up and maybe we get some benefit there. And that's going to be offset because I anticipate higher expenses and just going to nickel and dime all the way through these numbers. So at the end, it maybe be kind of equal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other board questions or comments for Candy? Okay, let's go to public comment if there's any. Erin?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have Brad Cornell.
Hello again, Madam Chair and board members. Brad Cornell with Audubon, Florida and Audubon, Western Everglades. I wanted to flag one small part of your budget, and I'm not sure it's explicitly discussed, but I heard Candy mention it, something in Bird Rookery Swamp. And I wanted to flag this because it actually relates to the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary hydrologic restoration and modeling issue that we discussed earlier. And that is, there's a bridge that has been damaged by Hurricane Irma on the north side of Bird Rookery Swamp along the North Trail there. That bridge represents an important link for maintenance, for research. Our researchers are going to, as you heard Dr. Clem mention, we're going to want to do some hydrogeologic studies that are along that transect. So we're going to need access. You all need access for your equipment. I got a call from Steve Coughlin with the district and asking about whether Audubon would support changing that to a sort of culvert system with riser boards. And I just want to flag that my suggestion to you all, and I discussed this with our leadership, with Dr. Clem and with Lisa Corday, the director, and also our director of conservation, Marshall Olson, who basically is in charge of managing our 13,000 acres. And they say, we need to sit tight and wait. We have some data we're collecting, hydrogeologic data, topographic data, and water level data that are, as you heard, being discussed earlier by Brad Jackson. And we need those data to inform the update of the model, the regional model, that's going to tell us what are the best investments that we can make for restoration, for hydrologic restoration. And rather than spend a bunch of money this year, and I thought I heard that from Candy in this year's budget. So I would recommend that you look at a temporary bridging situation, like an inflatable bridge that exists, that can be very durable, 60,000 pounds capacity, those kinds of things that I don't know anything about, but Marshall Olson and some of these other folks do know about, that don't cost so much on a temporary basis. So that would be my recommendation to you, is to hold off investing in that kind of infrastructure there until we know more and do something temporary. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Brad. Just so that you know, and to update the board, I've been in conversations with the district staff and the Basin staff. We've had one meeting so far, and we have another meeting scheduled on that issue. The thing that I want to avoid is wasting taxpayers' money. If we do something there it's not thought all the way through, then when we move forward to correct the hydrology for Corkscrew Swamp, which I'm optimistic we will, we may be undoing what we spent taxpayers' money on. So that's another caution in addition to what you had surfaced. So for the board, I'm working with the district staff. The Basin staff is involved. This damage occurred during Irma. Well, it's about 4 years ago. So we need to take a close look at it. So thank you for your comments. Aaron, is there any other public comment?
I have no more public comment.
Okay. Anything else for Candy? Candy, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much. The next item is our first board comment period. Is there any board member that has a comment at this time? Okay, Mr. Hill.
Well, I'd like to say something positive, but unfortunately, this situation is not. And it's an issue that is outside of our responsibility as a board, but it is closely related to it. And that's of the two sewage leaks that were reported this week in the media. Marco Island, about 27,000 gallons of sewage leaked, but a much bigger issue in Everglades City, where they had a leak at their so-called sewage treatment plant of 170,000 gallons of sewage that leaked. It's kind of interesting. Today, we've heard about so many pollution points, sources where the pollution may or may not be coming from. And we have all these brain power trying to analyze these very difficult systems as to where the problems may be coming from. This situation, we know exactly where the problem is coming from. And I'm really speaking to changing roles a little bit today to the nonprofit organizations. We have all the leading nonprofit organizations in our community, I think, on in the meeting today. And I'm going to ask them to look at this issue and see what you can do to affect a resolution, specifically in Everglades City, which, by the way, Everglades City is surrounded by public lands that we all have equity in. So, and this is not the first time this situation has arisen of leaks coming out of that sewage treatment plant that is scheduled. And I guess there is funds have been appropriated at the state level for the replacement of that. I don't know where it stands. It's personally a depressing issue because I also have a weekend home in that area. And it certainly can't be good for that, for Chokoloskee Bay and that surrounding area. So I do ask the nonprofit organizations to review the news this week and see what they can do to affect a better outcome. Thank you for listening to me.
I think those are very important comments. I think that, you know, there's a lot of effort to convert septic systems to sewer. but that works for the environment when that sewer system is working at capacity as it's intended to work, and it's in good operating condition and not just left to decay so that it can dump this wastewater into our sensitive water. So very important comments, Andy. I'm glad you raised it. Any other board comments at this time? Okay, we have another board comment period later. We'll go to the technical reports then, and we'll begin with the field station activity report with Jesus Carrasco.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. My name is Jesus Carrasco, Bureau Chief for Region 2. I'll be providing the technical report today. Before I start, wanted to make the announcement, Juan Bethencourt has been promoted. So he's moved on to be the Bureau Chief for Region 1. So we're excited about that. In the interim, we did have a replacement for Juan, and that's Andrew Wolf. Andrew Wolf came from Miami Field Station. He has over 30 years of experience with the district. He started his career in Fort Lauderdale, moved over to Miami, got promoted there. And during Hurricane Irma, he was one of the folks that came over to help the recovery process here in BCB. So he knows the area, he knows the folks here. He's going to hit the ground running, so we're excited. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us today. He is on an anniversary this weekend. So with that being said, I'll go forward. So I'll provide the overview on the maintenance activities, the remedy forest tracking status, the tree removal project, and the 3-month outlook. So in this picture here, you see William Cucci, our structure maintenance crew chief. He's removing debris on the Coco 2 weir. The water levels were low enough to provide access to perform the cleanup of the weir downstream. The next picture, you have Humberto Martinez, our structure maintenance tech, and he's installing boots at Coco 3. The boots keep the stem clean of dirt and debris that could damage the threads on the stem. The next picture, we have some washouts that are being repaired by staff, and you can see the staff bringing in the material and then bringing in our grade equipment to do the repair on the washout. In this next picture, we have Miguel Cueto. He's our IC Tech 1, and Mako Touche, our heavy equipment operator lead. And they dig out a broken conduit, our cork number 1 structure. The conduit had to be replaced as part of the structure automation program. Next slide. Here's Mikel again, and he's checking the wiring at millet number 3 after the automation program was completed. And on the picture on the right, you can see the back of JJ's head. In this next picture, the field station was getting bats that were roosting at the edge of the roof. We called in a bat expert. He installed some tubes where the bats were located. The bats could fly out, but because the tubes were so slick or smooth, they weren't able to get traction, get back in. Once we confirmed that all the bats were out, the cracks were filled and the repairs were done, and we installed a bat house where they could roost in the future. So you can see the picture here on the right. Part of our remedy forest tracking status from August 20th through October 14th. You can see we had 4 complaints regarding flooding, 1 for low water, 1 for right-of-way maintenance, structure maintenance. We had 1, vegetation canal 1, and we had a vehicle that went into the canal. All the blue bars indicate that these complaints are already resolved. The one that has the green bar, that one is still open, and this is based on that 1 vehicle that went in the canal in the picture you see there.
What still needs to be done, Jesus, with that?
We have risk management that is going to be following up with the vehicle owner's insurance for the district to get reimbursed. So no district monies was done for the repairs. This is all paid out of our risk management fund at a 601 fund.
Okay, thank you.
So wrapping up the tree removal project along Kokohachi Canal, I-75. So here we have some before and after pictures. So the slide shows the work that was done in this area. So you can see the trees that were there prior and how the area looks after the tree project was completed. And as you notice, there were some trees that were left nearest the roadway that shields the property owners from not having to see all that traffic, but we did remove enough trees that would take away the risk in the event of a storm of the trees going into the canal. So it was a good cooperation between the field station and the property owners as part of the outreach. Here's more pictures on the east side of I-75, the before on the left and the after on the right. On the left, you can't see the access gate that was there in place, but now after the project was completed, you can see there's a gate there that provides access not only for DOT, but for us to do maintenance as well, which is something that couldn't be done in the past. The 3-month outlook, canal maintenance, continue mechanical harvesting, vegetation management and debris removal on the canal banks and the weed barriers. Continue at our structures with yearly work plan by performing the preventative maintenance and SIP repairs. The execution of the Faka Union Canal Tree Project, which I'll brief you in a second, and continue supporting operational orders, the AVOs throughout the season. So the next project is the tree removal at Faka Union, and that's going to be from Southeast 52nd Avenue, and it goes south to the Faka pump station. And we'll be clearing both sides of the bank. So here in this picture, you have an example of what it looks out there, what it looks like out there now. During the high winds, situation of these trees going into the water could cause them floating down into the intake of the pump station at Faka, which could cause damage, and it could cause draining problems for the Golden Gate Estates area upstream. Next part will be the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Project, the SERP project activity report. And in this slide, we have Michael Perry, our stat diesel engine operator mechanic, and Mark Doyle, and they're removing a rusted out muffler, excuse me, on the generator at Merritt Pump Station. They replaced the muffler with a new one. It's back in service. And this one here, Salmon Orange, our IC Tech 2, was identifying why the trash rake over at Faka Union was not operating properly. He diagnosed that it was the proximity switch. He replaced the switch, and the trash rake is back in order, back in service. At the Merritt Pump Station, again, we have Michael Perry and Humberto Martinez. They removed the drive shaft from the main engine at Merritt Pump Station. The grease seals were going out of the shaft that caused the grease to fly out of the shaft when it was at full speed. So the seals were replaced and the shaft was reinstalled and back in service. The 3-month outlook, respond to seasonal pump orders and issues, monitor, update and log pump operational parameters, continue to housekeeping and safety monitoring pump monitors and accessories, pump motors and accessories. And we will be replacing 3 shafts at a Merritt pump station, and we expect that those shafts we'll start working on that in the dry season, which you expect the delivery of those shafts to be in the month of December. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Jesus. Are there any questions for Jesus on his field station report? I want to tell you how much we all appreciate the work that you and all of your folks do. I mean, I'm continually impressed with what your technicians are able to fix. And I know that you've got some challenges and they're just meeting those challenges every day. So thank you for your leadership of the region and getting your folks to do all that great work for us. I mean, it's really super.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to staff. Thank you.
Are there any citizens comment?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Great. All right, we'll move on then to the water conditions report, and Brad is joining us by Zoom for this report. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Back again to give the water conditions report since our last board meeting. So it's a pleasure to be here to give an update, and just kind of wanted to highlight the where we've been this year and kind of how the wet season's been, and then what can we expect moving forward. So with that, we'll next slide, please. So as usual here, I've got the hydrologic conditions here. This is our annual year-to-date rain report. So basically the addition here has been just the August through October rainfall amounts. Overall, we're running a little bit below average for the year-to-date, but not due to a slow wet season. It was really more of a dry season springtime issue that came. So we've pretty much erased all of those losses at this point and had a normal wet season. Next slide, please. So to fast forward or rewind here to September, our rainfall, this is where we have it broken out by basin for our region. Had an average of about 9.2 inches, a little bit above average for us. On the left, you can see it's broken out by our basin, so you can kind of get an idea of where the hot spots were, the areas and the variability in the rainfall that occurs when we're still in our wet season. So really the eastern part of the basins probably, they received a little bit more. Areas in the Barren River, that's State Road 29 watershed. You're getting anywhere, you're getting hot spots of 15 to 17 inches of rain in portions of that, but nowhere near what we were looking like a few years ago in 2017 when we had Irma and almost 20 inches of rain, or far cry from our driest year, 2019, when we only had a little over 2 inches. So we're a nice sweet spot for us for September. Next slide, please. So then fast forward, this is for October, just through the 25th. I know we'll get the front that comes through this afternoon or this evening, so we'll probably get some more rainfall to add to this, but this is really our transitional month out of the wet into the drier time. So we're pretty much on average already. So whatever rain we get at the end of this, the rest of today and the rest of the month will just be a bonus to tide us over through the remainder of the dry season. Nothing. It was pretty uniform, the rainfall throughout the basins for October. So didn't really see any significant areas of concern or issue there. Next slide, please. So like I said earlier, the dry season earlier this year, we want to look at just the water year as well. How much rainfall have we got just this wet season, and how will that tide us over to get us through this coming dry season? So it seems like it's a repeat, but we're right on average again. I've had about 43.5 inches of rain since the onset of the wet season that happened in late May. And then the dry season, we've transitioned out of it. Final official date, I don't believe has been set, but we've had several cold fronts move through. So we've pretty much transitioned out of that mid-month. And we're there in October, we're ending up around 3.2, 3.5 inches. So a little bit of a deficit, but really nothing that's concerning for that. Next slide, please. So that was how much water we've received. How much did we actually remove from the system that left to the tidal area? So here we've got our main coastal structures and our Picking Strand project. And you've got, these are the amount of acre feet that we've discharged out of the system in 1,000 acre feet. So for example, here you've got GG1, it's 112,000 acre feet of water. Now, remember I said we have had average rain, you would expect average releases, but actually we've released less than average so far this year. We're usually 125, 130,000 acre feet. So that goes to show we can, respond more quickly with some of the improvements we've made and control water levels tighter. So we're not releasing as much out of the system, but we're still able to provide flood control when it's needed. It's interesting to note there, I've combined the Picayune Strand, the PSRP, that's 71,000 acre feet that have been moved from the upstream drainage basins for restoration flow. So that's overcome, pretty much our almost our second biggest discharge area over Henderson Creek and Cocoa 1. So it's good to see. It's nice to see those restoration flows actually moving on their way south and doing its job. Next slide, please. So that was how much we've discharged out of the system. This is our snapshot in time of kind of the canal levels as they sit on the 21st of October. So here, as we've transitioned at this point out of the wet season operations, we want to hold on to all the drops that we can in the system. So that's why you see all of the blacks and blues on the both slides here, or both pictures. Those represent water levels being higher than they were historically. We're able to hold more water. That keeps water in our superficial aquifer, that keeps water on the surface as long as we can. I'd like to highlight the black area in Picayune Strand restoration and the entire Black Canal for the Faki Union. So all of that's above the 90th percentile for this time of year. And that's just a product of restoration at work. So you would expect this groundwater and surface water levels to be higher in the restoration area. And that propagates upstream as well as we have more control over the system. So we're able to hold all of those higher, which is beneficial. That's an area we want to keep the waters high up in the system as we can while balancing the restoration flows downstream. Also, on the other side of the coin there for the natural areas, on the northern areas, we've got our crew, and all of those areas, while we've had above average rainfall, or I'm sorry, about average rainfall, we're pretty much a little bit higher than normal in the southern areas of the crew, and then probably right smack in the middle of where you would expect us to be in the northern areas where you see the Lake Trafford and Cork Swamps, the two green dots on the right. Next slide, please. So right now, I'll just kind of stair step through the system. This is where Golden Gate Canal, and this is just a trend of the water levels, and kind of it gives you a snapshot in time of the operational kind of strategy, I guess. You can see as the purple line bounces around in the August through September timeframe towards the top of the blue band, that's our normal operational range. Then we move it. You can see where we moved everything up quite a bit. So it goes up into the pink area, and that you can see it's our kind of transition into dry season. We want to conserve all the water, so that you can see those operations there at GG1. Less so at GG4, and that's just a product of the type of structure that's there and the amount of water that's available. But it's not that we're discharging or losing the water. We're still higher in that GG4 area than we have been before. Next slide, please. Moving north here to the Kokohachi Canal, this system looks pretty good. Our coastal area, we're running right along the top of the line there, and we'll hold that full. The Coco number 3, we've moved that into dry season operations as well, or a little earlier than normal. I'll explain that reasoning why we did that a little bit later. But overall, we're right. You can kind of see we're at the very top of the range of where we'd like to be this time of year. Next slide, please. Moving over to the Faki Union Canal, like I mentioned, that whole area was in the upper percentiles, with the exception of Faki Union 1, but the FU number 5, we transitioned that to the top. So just it's kind of a repeat story here, but just showing that the system has the flexibility for us to make these changes quickly to be able to hold on to that rain, the surface water. Next slide, please. And now down south a little bit to our Henderson Creek Canal. HC number 1 there, that's still above average for this time of year. That structure, we try to keep it closed as much as possible, but still provide flood control for every one upstream. And the same thing goes for Henderson Creek number 2. That structure was only opened once this year, And that was just before a storm back in August. And since then, it's remained closed. That area still just has a natural decline in groundwater and surface water throughout the season. So it's already started its recession as we trek towards the dry season here. Next slide, please. Okay, now over to our Picayune Strand operations. We support the district SERP Project 2 here for water management and operations. So on the right here, we've got the Merritt pump station. That's the blue triangle and blue trend line. And kind of what you can see there is we've started our trend up towards the top of the dry season range, starting back in early August. So if you could approximate a straight line heading straight up to the top, that lets us hold more water upstream while still balancing the water that's going to the restoration flows. So you don't just turn it off like a switch, it's a gradual shift. And then in the Paca Union on the right, this is the first year, I mentioned this last time, that we've been doing restoration pumping, and the canal's been plugged for the top 3.5 miles of that canal that's left there. So right now we're transitioning that to water conservation, but still maintaining restoration flows as well. So the purple line, it's higher than we've been able to hold at, just as a product of the canal being plugged downstream, but still being able to deliver water, which that also propagates upstream as well. And that's the reason you see some of the higher percentiles upstream in the Paca Union Canal. Next slide, please. So this is our colorful map here, kind of shows what's going on the surface as far as the water depth in our natural areas. So if you look a year ago, that's the one on the right. And what I'd highlight here is our Picayune Strand, the PSRP. You don't see any really green area, which indicates you've got water on the surface, right where the S is in the PSRP on the right. Fast forward to a month ago in the middle in current, you've got that's your restoration that's still showing. Since that canal's been plugged, that's your restoration benefit. There's still more canal to be plugged as the project moves forward. That those greens will spread even further south. But at this point, you can see the restoration in action, which is kind of neat to see. And then the crew areas at top, it just shows you, an approximate depth of water there. As you would expect, it's saturated this time of year. We're hopeful this will continue to get refined and improved as we get the topography. So that topography data I mentioned earlier, we can also use that tool here to help refine and create a better picture of what's actually going on here. So it's not just a modeling tool we'll be using that topography data for. Next slide, please. So we've looked at all of the surface water. Let's look at groundwater here real quick. In a nutshell, things are all looking good. Everything is in the normal range for the groundwater in Collier County. They are starting their seasonal lowering, as you would expect. You would note that the left chart there, we are kind of trending towards the bottom of that green band. So we might be close to the 25th percentile, which is a little lower than you would expect given an average year of rainfall. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to keep as much water in the system to help promote this groundwater recharge into the Tamiami Aquifer. But overall, things are good, and we'll continue to monitor this as the season moves forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned earlier why we moved into dry season operations and water conservation earlier than normal this year. And that was really the long range outlook and the flexibility we have in our capital program. So La Nina, I think they actually called it now, but La Nina was developing when we were making these operational decisions on when to move things higher and hold more water in the system. And what that means for us, South Florida, is that we have a hotter and drier than normal dry season. So in an effort to use every tool we have to hold water in the system, we use this as a long range kind of indicator of when can we move the system and when should we, while we're still balanced and have the ability to react to storms and rainfall. But there was pretty high confidence in all of the climatological products that show that we're going to have a below average dry season. So with that in mind, that's one of the reasons and one of the drivers we decided to move the system to water conservation earlier than normal. Next slide, please. And in the short term, it is dry season, so there's not a whole lot to say here. I'm glad the hurricane forecast one I decided not to put because there's really nothing brewing for us. And then there's a cold front this evening for us. It'll give us a little bit of rain, but then we'll have a nice cool and dry weekend in front of us. So it's nice to see this change in pattern. I know I'm probably not the only one that enjoys the cooler weather as well. With that, next slide, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad, for your report. I have one question. Is there anything you're watching closely at this point in time to make a difference in how you operate the system?
I mean, I look at the forecast and the conditions on the ground, and then try to stay in our normal operational ranges as much as the system will allow. Maybe I'm not sure if that would answer your question or not.
So you're not seeing anything out of the ordinary at this point in time from previous years, I guess is my point.
Oh, no, ma'am. It looks, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Everything looks good, moving in for this time of year. Just anticipating a little bit drier than normal so we can try and hold every drop we have, but nothing out of the ordinary at this point besides that.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any of the other board members have questions for Brad?
I get a question, quick one. On Union Canal, Brad, well, one of the purposes of the restoration of the Picayune obviously was to distribute the water flows more evenly in a natural flow. Is there any evidence or any data that you have to suggest that we're seeing that process now working by lowering the flows going in the canal, and who knows where hopefully it's going where it should be?
In short, for the Merritt Canal area, that area that's had full restoration for a while, yes, you've seen groundwater levels come up and that sheet flow restore. We've got monitoring wells throughout the region, and if you look at the depth of water and the type of vegetation that it should be, I believe you can tell that it matches up more closely, and you can see the restoration in works. You have partial restoration in a lot of the other areas because you still have canals that are adjacent, and those canals can have they can have an effect pretty far away from themselves since they're drawing groundwater. But yes, you can see the restoration work in progress.
Okay, but you don't have data on the amount of the volume of water going out of the Union Canal, do you?
There is, so since the canals are still open on the Miller and on the Union for part of it, we can calculate the volume that's left Union number 1 and it goes into the bay. We have a number for that. That was on one of the previous slides. It is definitely the largest of the outfalls. But
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how intricate that system is and how just the water flowing over the surface of the land can impact the other portions that we monitor. It's very interesting how it's all interconnected. Because I was trying to say to the Corps of Engineers, can't we plug the rest of the Union Canal? But say the way the water responds, it will provide a flooding concern for some of those adjacent properties. Is there any public comment on this, Erin?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks, Brad, for your water conditions report. We'll now go to the Basin Administrator's report. Lisa Keeler.
Good afternoon. And while Erin is pulling up the presentation, Madam Chair, I want to echo your sentiments about the great job that our field station does for us during flood control season, as well as Brad. I think you all know that Brad was our only water manager we had all summer long. And that is a huge job. And so, Brad, if you are still with us, thank you very much for all of your hard effort, as well as the field station. We had a great wet season, very successful, and so very proud of the team today.
Thank you.
So a couple of things that I'd like to run through with you. Every October, we take a look at your next year's calendar. So what you see on the screen and what you had in your packet reflects our proposed meeting dates for next year. They follow our schedule that we had last year, and I believe the year before, with meetings in February, April, July, August, and this time next year on October 27th. So unless there's any questions about that, I'll move on. At the last meeting, Mr. Hill, you had asked about our public outreach efforts at the Basin. So I wanted just to roll through some of the things that we do, because they're not always reflected. They're not right out in your face all of the time. And Candy Heater is also going to talk to you about how we can change that and reflect that to you in your monthly financial forecast. But for this purpose, we primarily work with our staff in West Palm Beach. Sean Cooley's team does a fantastic job. They work through press releases, social media to get information out to the public about all of the good things that we do, which is examples. Our Basin board meetings, they put a flyer out. They post that on social media so that folks know that we have this meeting, that we're talking about important subjects. We also do press releases on our groundbreaking for our capital projects. We see news releases and stories in the media about Lake Trafford and all of the work that's going on out there, as well as our regional partnerships. As those projects are finished, we work with those various agencies to come together to put out information about how great that partnership is, and say the water quality improvements that we're making for the area. And you'll see that we have several projects that are wrapping up, Sean, in the next 6 months. We're hoping. So you'll start seeing more of those in the upcoming months. We also will put information out about our tree clearing projects and why those are so important, as well as the field station activities and the work that they do to maintain flood control for this community. Additionally, there are public speaking engagements, whether it be to our local Board of County Commissioners, City Council, any other public meetings, workshops. I normally get invited every year to speak to Leadership Collier class at their Environmental Day, which Meredith Budd is hosting this year, and I will be helping her out with Environmental Day this year, as well as in homeowner association meetings. And really just the requests come in from various sources, but I want to let you know that there is a public speaking component to our outreach at the Basin as well. And that's really it in a nutshell regarding our public outreach and engagement. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, great. So that really wraps up my report today, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And along with Lisa, I'm out on the speaking circuit as well from time to time, both here in the Basin and also as a governing board member. I have a national conference coming up next month, which I'm a panelist. So it keeps us gainfully employed. If there's any suggestions, though, Andy, I know you brought this up, that you have, please feed them to Lisa and see what what ideas that we can discuss as a board and see if there's something else we could be doing.
I'm thinking of things, but I don't have anything specific, so I'll,
but we can,
public forum, I'll save it until I come up with a good idea.
that sounds great, because we're certainly, as a board, we can discuss those ideas and then pick a path going forward. Great.
Right. Thank you.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much for your report. Candy, we have the monthly financial report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. The monthly financial report in your packet is through the month of August. The Basin is really in great standings with your revenue collections. You've collected 102.1% of your revenues. So you've collected more revenue than what we budgeted, which helps you and it helps your financial forecast. The reason being mainly is because you do have some FEMA funding that has been posted to our general ledger as revenue from Hurricane Irma, about $210,000. So you've collected about $235,000 of additional revenue, recurring revenue. And then as far as your expenditures and your encumbrances to this point, you all are looking well also. You've spent over 8.2 million, and then under contract and encumbered at this point in time, over $6 million. So staff met with me the beginning of this week on the September monthly financials. So you should be receiving those sometime soon from your basin administrator. And I will tell you ahead of time that the basin looks very good on the expenditures. You know, they're unaudited, but for the year end, staff did a great job, and you'll be able to see that on your expenditure and obligation side, all the work that they were successful moving forward with. With that said, to address Mr. Hill's request to illustrate, you know, the good work that the basin staff does with outreach, you know, Lisa had mentioned that what we're going to do is we're going to try to follow suit with illustrating that in your financials as well, so that the financials tell the same story as to, you know, what staff will be working on. So today, Ms. Maytalk had met with one of her analysts, and they're working with Lisa to come up with a percentage of staff's time that will be used towards supporting outreach. And we're going to move those monies into that appropriate program, into the outreach program. So you'll start seeing those expenditures reflect more appropriately and be on record as, you know, outreach activities taking place and memorialized in your financials. So that will start this month, October, and you should be getting those monthly financial in about 2 months, because it's about 2 months in the rear for 22.
Thank you, Candy. And I thank you for being responsive to the board's request in regards to highlighting public outreach. I really appreciate the work that you did on that. Are there any questions for Candy at this time on the monthly financials, or Ms. Rivera?
Just a quick observation or comment, or maybe you can shed some light. But when I see license and permit fees with 122% or greater, that's pretty phenomenal if it's absorbed by the existing baseline staff that processes that, because we did not have the cost side reflect that much activity either. Is that correct? How I'm interpreting?
So those staff members that process those fees are reflected in this on the salary side, obviously, but to your point, no, we did not reflect additional staff or FTEs, yes, on the expenditure side that processed all that revenue. So yes.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Anything else? Good. All right, Erin, is there a public comment?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Candy. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to final board comment. Is there anything? Dan, do you have anything? Andy?
No, I don't.
Nanette?
Thank you. No more comments.
No more comment. I have a couple of items before we wrap up. One of the things that jogged my memory about public outreach when we were talking about it just a minute ago is, communications has changed. So when we make these flyers and things available to you, if you have some community members or some civic leaders that you're socialize with or whatever, feel free to share the materials and to pass it out there too, and share it with members of the general public. That's certainly a part of it too. Also, I want to remind everyone, we're celebrating Lisa's birthday, so there are cupcakes. Now, we didn't take a break today, so that means you get to wrap one up and take it home, because I don't think that she wants to leave here taking all her birthday cupcakes back, okay? So we need to take a moment and share it with her and have some time together. I also want to thank the board members. It's really, really been a pleasure serving with you. I know how much time that you dedicate as volunteers. We're all volunteers. The time you take to prep for these meetings. And I just really want to appreciate it, to tell you how much I appreciate it and how much I enjoyed the ribbon cutting. We haven't broke the ground, but it was ribbon cutting. They were moving a lot of dirt there at the Cypress structure when we got a chance to share that moment together in the big Cypress Basin and dig some dirt together and get that going. So that's been great, and you've been great to work with. And I want to just tell you publicly how much I appreciate the effort and the work that you're all doing and how much you add to the big Cypress Basin board. So thank you. I also want to thank the staff. I really commend you for the dedication and the expertise that you bring to every subject that we discuss here. And I think that each board member might agree with me on how much they add to the discussion in terms of their knowledge of these topics that we have to deal with. And this board has some unique subjects and projects right now, and that's great because we're moving things forward, but it wouldn't be possible without the staff. And Lisa, you and your entire team are to be commended for your dedication and the work that you do and in preparation for these meetings. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone that serves on the Big Cypress Basin staff. And whether you're an integral part of it, or an ancillary part of it with the field station and all the folks there that support that. So I really appreciate that. And today you can see another hybrid variation of a meeting, and everything was smooth as silk, and that takes a lot of dedication. So I really appreciate that. I might have skipped over general public comment. I want to make sure that we gave the public a chance to speak one last time. Is there any general public comment that's left? Anybody signed up to speak, Erin, or on Zoom?
I have no public comment, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
I just wanted to make sure that I just didn't inadvertently pass over that. Well, thank you everyone for a smooth meeting, and thank you for all your contributions during the meeting and our public speakers as well. Our next Basin Board meeting is scheduled for February 24th, 2022 in the new year. With that, we're adjourned.